Power isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself or demand attention. Most people think power is about dominance, speaking more, showing more, controlling others directly. But the Sigma male understands something different. Real power is subtle. It's in what you don't say, what you don't reveal, and what you choose not to react to. And the moment you see it, you realize most people are playing the game wrong. What makes this powerful is that it's not learned the traditional way, it's observed. Patterns, behavior, reactions. Over time, he starts noticing how influence actually works. Who gets respected and why? Who loses control and how? And instead of following rules blindly, he understands the principles behind them. That's what gives him an advantage. He doesn't chase power, he positions himself, so power forms around him. In this video, we're breaking down the hidden laws of power Sigma males follow instinctively and how these silent principles shape influence, respect, and control without force. If you want to understand power psychology, strategic thinking, and how to move with quiet authority, subscribe to Silent Wise and stay until the end, because the final law is what separates temporary influence from real control. He understands that silence creates more influence than constant talking. Silence builds influence. Fewer words, greater impact. He stops filling every moment with explanation, opinion, or reaction. In most conversations, people speak to maintain control, adding more, clarifying more, trying to stay visible. But he removes that instinct. He allows pauses to exist. He lets conversations unfold without inserting himself into every space. That restraint changes how others respond immediately. As interactions continue, the difference becomes noticeable. While others compete to be heard, he listens. While others expand their point, he delivers it briefly or not at all. That absence of constant speech creates tension, not discomfort, but attention. People begin focusing more on him because there is less to process. Each word carries weight because it is not diluted. Each pause creates space for others to think. And in that space, influence grows. From that point, the dynamic shifts quietly. Others start revealing more, filling the silence he leaves behind. They explain themselves further, add unnecessary detail, expose thoughts they didn't plan to share. He doesn't need to ask more questions or push for answers. The silence does it for him. While they speak to be understood, he listens to understand. And that difference gives him clarity others don't have. Over time, this approach becomes consistent. He speaks only when it matters. No repetition, no unnecessary detail, just clarity. That precision makes his words more noticeable. People begin waiting for him to speak because they know it will be intentional. And when he doesn't speak, the silence itself becomes a signal. It creates curiosity, sometimes pressure, often attention. This also removes one of the biggest weaknesses in communication: overexposure. When everything is said, nothing remains to influence. But when words are limited, meaning becomes stronger. What is left unsaid becomes just as powerful as what is spoken. Eventually, the effect becomes clear. While others try to gain influence through volume, he gains it through control. And in that control, silence becomes more than absence, it becomes strategy. He knows emotional control is power, while reactions give others control. Emotional control creates power. Reactions give it away. He stops responding instantly, stops letting moments dictate his state. Most people move through situations guided by feeling. Anger triggers words. Pressure triggers decisions. Tension triggers reaction. But he interrupts that pattern. A pause appears, and inside that pause, control returns. What once felt automatic becomes intentional. As interactions continue, the difference becomes visible. A provocation appears, but no reaction follows. A situation escalates, but he remains steady. Others expect a response they can read, something predictable, something they can use, but it doesn't come. That absence changes the dynamic. Without reaction, there is nothing to influence. Without visible emotion, there is nothing to manipulate. The same environment that once created pressure now loses its effect. From that point, clarity replaces impulse. He observes instead of reacting, evaluates instead of responding emotionally. That shift allows him to see what others miss. Intentions become visible, patterns become clear. While others are caught inside the moment, he stands outside of it. That position gives him an advantage, not because he is stronger, but because he's not controlled by the same triggers. Over time, this control becomes consistent. He no longer reacts based on how something feels in the moment. Decisions are made based on understanding, not emotion. That removes mistakes caused by impulse. It removes regret caused by reaction. Every action becomes placed, not forced, and that placement creates precision. People begin noticing the difference without fully understanding it. They try to provoke, to test, to create a response, but nothing shifts him. The absence of reaction creates uncertainty, and uncertainty removes their control. The same tactics that work on others fail here because there is nothing to attach to. Eventually, the realization becomes clear. Emotional control is not about suppressing feeling, it is about directing it. And once that direction is mastered, influence shifts completely, because the one who controls their response controls the outcome. He observes before acting, gathering information, others reveal freely. Observation comes first, action comes later. He doesn't rush into situations just because they demand movement. Most people react quickly, speaking, deciding, responding without fully seeing what's happening. But he delays that instinct. He watches, he listens. He allows the moment to unfold before placing himself inside it. That delay is not hesitation, it's strategy. As interactions continue, information begins revealing itself without effort. People speak more than necessary. They explain, justify, react emotionally, and in doing so, they expose patterns they don't realize are visible. He doesn't interrupt that process. He lets it continue. The less he inserts himself, the more others reveal. Details connect naturally: tone, timing, behavior, inconsistencies. What looks like a normal interaction becomes a source of insight. From that point, clarity begins forming without pressure. He doesn't need to ask direct questions or push for answers. The environment provides everything through observation. While others focus on being understood, he focuses on understanding. That difference shifts the entire dynamic. He gathers information while others give it away. And because he is not reacting, nothing disrupts what is being revealed. Over time, this approach becomes consistent. He moves only when he sees clearly. Decisions are placed after patterns are confirmed, not before. That removes guesswork. He removes unnecessary mistakes. While others act and then adjust, he understands and then acts. That sequence creates precision. People rarely notice this phase because it looks like stillness. They assume nothing is happening because nothing is being said or done immediately. But behind that silence, everything is being processed. By the time action happens, it is already aligned with what has been observed. Eventually, the difference becomes clear. While others rely on assumption, he relies on information. And because that information was gathered without resistance, it becomes more accurate, more complete, and more useful. He limits what he reveals, protecting his intentions and direction. Information stays controlled. Intentions stay private. He doesn't share everything he thinks, plans, or feels. Most people reveal too much, explaining goals early, exposing direction before it's stable, sharing details that invite opinions and interference. It feels natural to communicate openly, but over time, he sees the cost. The more you reveal, the more others can influence, question, or disrupt your path. So he reduces it. As interactions continue, the difference becomes visible. When asked about plans, he answers selectively. When conversations move toward personal direction, he keeps details minimal, not evasive, not distant, just controlled. Others may expect full transparency, but they don't get it. That absence creates curiosity, sometimes confusion. Why isn't he sharing more? What is he working on? The less he reveals, the more attention shifts toward what remains hidden. From that point, control strengthens. Without full access to his intentions, others cannot predict his moves. Without detailed information, they cannot interfere with his direction. He moves without external pressure shaping his decisions. What he builds stays protected because it is not exposed prematurely. While others adjust their path based on feedback, he continues without interruption. Over time, this approach becomes consistent. Conversations become focused on what is necessary, not what is possible. There is no need to explain every step or justify every decision. His direction remains internal. That internal clarity replaces external validation. The less he shares, the more stable his movement becomes. People often misunderstand this phase. They see limited information and assume distance or secrecy. But what they are actually seeing is strategy. The ability to separate what needs to be shared from what needs to be protected. Not everything gains value from being known. Eventually, the result becomes clear. While others expose their direction early and adjust under pressure, he builds quietly until results speak for themselves. And by the time those results appear, the process behind them is already completely protected from influence from the start. He controls his presence, making absence increase his value. Presence becomes intentional. Absence becomes strategic. He stops being constantly available and starts choosing when to be seen. Most people maintain visibility to stay relevant, always present, always responding, always engaged. But constant presence lowers perceived value. When something is always there, it becomes normal. He removes that pattern. He appears when it matters and disappears when it doesn't. As interactions continue, the shift becomes noticeable. The moments when he is present feel different, more focused, more intentional. Conversations carry weight because they are not constant. When he steps back, the space he leaves behind doesn't stay empty, it becomes noticeable. People begin recognizing the difference between when he is there and when he is not. That contrast creates value without effort. From that point, absence begins working in his favor. When he is not present, attention moves toward him instead of away. People think about what is not there. They replay interactions, question the distance, anticipate the return. That psychological effect increases engagement without him needing to do anything. While others try to maintain attention through constant presence, he maintains it through controlled absence. Over time, this approach stabilizes. He is no longer reacting to every situation or maintaining visibility for the sake of being seen. His presence becomes selective. That selectivity protects his time, his energy, and his focus. It also strengthens how others perceive him. What is limited becomes valuable. What is controlled becomes respected. People often misunderstand this phase. They see absence and assume disconnection or lack of interest. But what they are actually seeing is positioning. The ability to step in and out of environments without losing relevance. Not because of frequency, but because of impact. Eventually, the result becomes clear. While others rely on being constantly present to stay visible, he relies on timing. And in that timing, presence gains weight and absence gains power. He avoids unnecessary conflict, choosing strategic battles only. Conflict gets filtered, energy gets preserved. He stops engaging in every disagreement that appears. Most people react to conflict instantly defending, arguing, trying to prove a point in the moment. It feels necessary, like silence equals weakness, but he sees something different. Not every conflict leads to value. Some only drain time, attention, and control, so he removes them before they begin. As situations unfold, the difference becomes clear. A challenge appears, but he doesn't respond immediately. A disagreement forms, but he doesn't escalate it. Others expect resistance, but they don't get it. That absence shifts the dynamic. Without engagement, the conflict has nothing to grow from. It fades on its own, while others invest energy into proving themselves right. He steps back and observes whether the situation is even worth addressing. From that point, selection becomes precise. He chooses when to engage based on outcome, not emotion. If the situation aligns with his direction, he acts. If it doesn't, he ignores it completely. That choice removes unnecessary battles from his path. While others are constantly reacting to every challenge, he remains focused on what actually matters. That focus creates efficiency. Over time, this approach strengthens his control. Energy is no longer wasted on arguments that change nothing. Attention stays directed toward progress instead of distraction. The same situations that pull others into cycles of conflict have no effect on him. That difference allows him to move forward without interruption. People often misunderstand this phase. They see a lack of reaction and assume avoidance or weakness. But what they are actually seeing is discipline. The ability to recognize which battles create value and which ones only create noise. He doesn't avoid conflict, he selects it. Eventually the result becomes clear. While others exhaust themselves proving points, he advances by choosing outcomes. And in that selection, conflict becomes a tool, not a trap. He lets others underestimate him, using it as an advantage. Underestimation becomes leverage. No correction, no need to prove. He stops trying to change how others see him too early. Most people react when they feel overlooked, explaining more, showing more, trying to adjust perception immediately. But he does the opposite. He allows the misjudgment to exist, not because it's accurate, but because it creates space. As situations unfold, the advantage becomes clear. When others underestimate him, they lower their attention. They don't prepare for his actions. They don't expect precision. That lack of expectation removes resistance. While they focus elsewhere, he builds quietly. He observes without pressure, moves without being tracked, and develops without interruption. The absence of attention becomes protection. From that point, control increases. He is no longer reacting to how he is perceived. He is using it. The lower the expectation, the less interference he faces. Others reveal more because they don't feel threatened. They act naturally, without caution. That behavior becomes information, and information creates clarity. While they underestimate him, he understands them. Over time, this approach compounds. Progress builds without being challenged. Skills develop without being compared. Direction strengthens without external pressure. The same situation that would frustrate most people becomes an advantage because it removes obstacles. He doesn't waste energy correcting perception. He invests it into results. People often realize the difference too late. By the time outcomes appear, the gap between perception and reality becomes obvious. What they underestimated has already been built. And because there was no warning, no visible buildup, the shift feels sudden even though it wasn't. Eventually, the realization becomes clear. Being underestimated is not a disadvantage when it is used correctly. It becomes a position of freedom to move without attention, to build without interference, and to act without resistance. And in that position, advantage forms naturally. He focuses on outcomes, not opinions or approval. Outcomes define direction. Opinions lose relevance. Approval becomes noise. He stops measuring progress through what others think and starts measuring it through what actually happens. Most people get pulled into perception, how something looks, how it's received, whether it gains approval. But perception shifts constantly. It changes with mood, with trend, with environment. Outcomes don't. They remain as proof of action. As situations unfold, the difference becomes visible. While others adjust their behavior to match expectations, he stays aligned with results. A decision is made not because it will be accepted, but because it will work. A path is chosen not because it looks right, but because it leads somewhere specific. That shift removes hesitation. There is no need to wait for approval before moving. Action becomes direct, not negotiated. From that point, clarity increases. Without opinions influencing direction, distractions lose their pull. He doesn't react to every comment, every reaction, every external signal. Those inputs exist, but they don't define movement. What matters is progress. Are things improving? Is the direction consistent? Are results forming? Those questions replace everything else, and because they are objective, they create stability. Over time, this focus compounds. Effort becomes more efficient because it is not divided between action and perception. Energy stays directed toward building instead of managing how things are seen. While others shift based on feedback, he continues based on outcome. That consistency creates momentum. People often misunderstand this phase. They see a lack of response to opinions and assume indifference. But what they are actually seeing is prioritization. The ability to separate what matters from what doesn't. Opinions may exist, but they don't produce results. Approval may feel important, but it doesn't build anything. Eventually, the difference becomes undeniable. While others remain influenced by perception, he moves through it. And because his focus stays on outcomes, those outcomes begin defining how he is seen without him needing to manage it. He builds power quietly, without needing recognition. Power grows in silence. No announcements, no early exposure. He stops showing progress before it becomes real. Most people tie growth to visibility, sharing steps, seeking acknowledgement, measuring progress through attention. But attention invites interference. Opinions appear, expectations form, direction gets pulled. He removes that entire layer. Work happens without audience, movement happens without noise, and because of that, nothing interrupts the build. As time unfolds, the structure becomes stronger. Skills develop without being compared. Systems form without being questioned. He focuses on what compounds: discipline, consistency, clarity. While others divide their energy between building and being seen, he concentrates it entirely on building. That concentration accelerates progress quietly. There are no distractions from maintaining an image, no pressure to perform publicly. Everything remains internal, controlled, aligned. From that point, power begins forming beneath the surface. It doesn't look dramatic, it looks consistent. Repetition builds capability. Capability builds confidence. Confidence builds presence. Each layer connects to the next. Nothing is rushed, nothing is forced. While others chase visible results, he constructs the foundation that produces them, and that foundation cannot be seen until it is complete. Over time, results start appearing without warning. What seemed quiet becomes undeniable. What looked like absence reveals structure. The same person who stayed out of attention now carries weight when he enters it, and because there was no gradual exposure, the shift feels sudden to others, even though it was built step by step. People often misunderstand this phase. They assume silence means inactivity, but what they are actually seeing is focus, the removal of everything unnecessary so that progress can compound without resistance. He doesn't need recognition to continue. The process itself is enough. Eventually, the difference becomes clear. While others rely on attention to feel powerful, he builds power without needing to be seen. And when it finally becomes visible, it carries more weight because it was never dependent on recognition to exist. He walks away when necessary, knowing detachment is ultimate control. Detachment creates control. Exit remains an option. He never places himself in a position where he has to stay. Most people hold on too long, invested in outcomes, attached to people, tied to situations that no longer align. That attachment limits movement. It forces decisions based on emotion instead of clarity. But he removes that dependency. If something stops making sense, he is ready to leave without hesitation. As situations unfold, this difference becomes visible. Others argue, try to fix, try to hold on. He observes. If the direction is broken, he doesn't attempt to repair what is already clear. He steps back, not impulsively, not emotionally intentionally. That step removes him from the dynamic completely. Without his presence, the situation loses its hold on him, and without that hold, there is no control over his decisions. From that point, freedom becomes real. Detachment allows him to choose based on alignment, not pressure. He doesn't stay because of history. He doesn't stay because of expectation. He doesn't stay because of emotion. He stays only if it makes sense. And if it doesn't, he moves. That ability changes everything. It removes fear of loss because nothing controls his direction. Over time, this mindset strengthens his position. He becomes harder to manipulate, harder to pressure, harder to influence. Others rely on attachment to create control, expectation, emotion, obligation, but none of that works when there is nothing to hold on to. He remains steady because he is not tied to outcomes that limit his movement. People often misunderstand this phase. They see detachment and assume indifference or coldness. But what they are actually seeing is control. The ability to step away without being pulled back by emotion. The clarity to recognize when something no longer aligns and act on it immediately. Eventually, the realization becomes clear. The strongest position is not holding on, it's knowing you can leave at any time. And once that becomes real, control is no longer external. It becomes absolute. Power isn't something you announce, it's something you structure. Silence, control, observation, detachment. Each principle works quietly, but together they change everything. While most people chase influence through visibility and reaction, the Sigma male builds it through restraint and precision. No noise, no need to prove, just consistent control over how he moves, what he reveals, and where he invests his energy. The truth is, most people lose power without realizing it. They react too fast, reveal too much, stay too long, and depend too heavily on approval. And by doing that, they give control away piece by piece. But once you understand these laws, everything shifts. You stop playing the visible game and start controlling the invisible one. If you want more insights into power psychology, silent influence, and how to move with control without force, make sure you subscribe to Silent Wise. And tell me in the comments, which law do you think gives the most power: silence, control, or detachment?